Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. How are you this morning? It's Tuesday morning. I apologise in advance. I'm battling a bit of a cold flu thing. Actually, I forgot to bring out what I'm using to help me with it, but we'll leave that for another chat show. This morning, I want to talk to you about anger and share with you some really pertinent information, especially for those of us with complex PTSD. If you have someone in your life who has complex PTSD, this will also help you understand what's happening internally for them. So there's two parts to today. The first part is building an understanding, an internal understanding of what happens for us with the anger. Like, how did it come to be so explosive? So, in a way, how did it come to be so trigger happy? Like, bang, it goes off. And yet I know that's not who I am. And the second part is, what can I do about it? So, which parts? There's actually three parts we can look at with anger in order that we can address them. Now, if at any point in time any of these resonate, write it down, and what I want you to do is see your therapist, see your trauma coach and trauma recovery coach, and work through it to develop strategies that are specific for you in your situation. Now, the reason why we need to go to a therapist or have a trauma recovery coach when we need it is because when our neurobiological whole system, now our brain's a very incredible computer-like instrument, and when it goes offline, and we've been offline for a long time, so imagine that your computer's offline and you're trying to work out how to get it back online. Well, we can't get it back online, most of us, without professional help. And it's the same with our brain. We can't get it back online without professional help, because one of the things that when our brain goes offline, so we're triggered, is our perception. So we don't have the ability to see how we can do things differently, or we don't have the ability to see how we can go about things in another way, or where I'm at with the whole situation. It's an external element, and it's also an internal element that we need to work with, okay? So for those who are brand new here today, welcome. My name's Linda. I am a trauma recovery coach, but I have also walked this path myself and continue to walk from recovery to remission. And it's critical that we have people who do this work that understand where we're at. Now, anger, complex PTSD and anger. So what are we actually looking at it? So if we were to look at anger from just a normal brain, do we have normal brains? Tell me. So we're a brain that hasn't experienced trauma and doesn't go offline like ours. So that's how people normally address anger, or a therapist would normally address anger, is from the perspective that your brain's still online. Sorry, I'm laughing at myself thinking, oh my goodness, all the time my brain's been offline. But anyhow, I'm trying not to be too serious, but this is actually a serious subject, serious because it impacts our relationships, okay? So anger isn't about having to unpack why I'm angry, okay? So in the past, if you've gone to a therapist and said, look, I've got this anger happening, whether it's internal or it's coming out externally, they would say to you, well, why are you angry? That would be the first question someone would ask, is why are you angry? Let's explore it. And however, for us, we need to examine what's happening underneath the anger, all right? So how did it happen? So various forms of childhood trauma, neglect, bullying, sex trafficking have impacted us internally, all right? So we focus all our attention, our thoughts, and our actions towards survival. So anger is common when feeling betrayed, shocked, or feeling violent, okay? It comes out when we feel threatened at our deepest core. Our first response is anger. It's immediate. There's no thought that goes into it at all, especially because in childhood, when we had all of these experiences happen, any of the childhood trauma experiences happen, there was someone bigger than us doing things that threatened our very survival and impacted us so greatly that I know for me that there was no language around it. So all the emotions were stuffed into my body. How I felt remained in there, all right, locked away under lock and key. And it's not just about, there is one side of the recovery process that is about how I felt, but there's the other side of the recovery process of understanding that I've got all this energy, this emotional energy inside my body, and I've got to be able to just sit with it and work through it, all right? So we can remain stuck we can remain stuck with complex PTSD, answering any of life's stresses with anger. So if stress comes along, so imagine you're on the train going to work and you're thinking about the day, you think then, it comes up what happened yesterday, what stopped you getting on with your work yesterday, and the first response is anger. And I've been there. I know that this is what happens, that you can be sitting there and all of a sudden before the day's even started, the first instant response is anger. And it's because we had no control over the situation when we were children, like zero control over what was happening in our lives. And our first response to anything that's stressful is to get angry, even though we know it's not who we are. It's just an instant response wired into us from childhood, because back in the rear of the brain, in the deepest parts when we go in the vagus nerve area, is our brain developed a fear response, all right? So when our brain developed the fear response, the opposite to that is someone who never experienced trauma. Their first response to a stress is, this is manageable, okay? They'll go, this is manageable, we can do this and this and this. Whereas our unconscious, uncalled for as an adult response is anger, all right? And it's not something that we choose. It's something that automatically happens because stress signifies to us, until we've learned to manage this, stress signifies to us a threat, a danger to our lives. And of course this doesn't sound natural, because it's not. It was something that happened in childhood, and it's childhood developmental trauma. So that anger is that first response. When the fear response goes off, everything goes offline, and our response to that fear is anger, because we can't see how this is manageable initially, all right? So we can remain stuck when we don't understand what's happening at the neurobiological level, because the first thing we do is blame ourselves. Okay, we say, oh my goodness, why am I angry? What's going on? And then that's internally, and then externally we start pointing a finger going, well, if they hadn't done this or this hadn't happened, then I would have had control of the situation. I would have been able to do things my way, and it would have all been sorted out properly, as it should be. Okay, because remember, perfectionism is something that we strive for, because in childhood that perfectionism kept us safe. So we kept looking to see how we needed to remain safe. And we developed a belief that if I'm perfect, then I will be safe. But of course that's not true. We just, look, I know for me, as a child, I used that aspect to try and hide when things were happening in the house that were beyond my control. So that's a deeper side to it as well. It's not something that we talk about a lot in and amongst our friendships, but we do go and talk to a specialist about this because our friends don't understand and they haven't had this happen, and it's not fair to them to say, this is what's happening, can you sit with me while I work this through? If a friend is equipped to do that, that's okay, but most of our friends aren't equipped to do that. It's not something that, we grow up as a society being equipped to do. Anger, this whole response, can also affect how you feel about you, how you feel about your life. So it impacts us deeply internally and externally. Okay, let me just move on. Okay, so the internal systems most closely linked to emotion and survival, so all the internal stuff that happens when that fear trigger goes off and our first response is anger, are the heart, circulation, our glands, our brain, which we've spoken about. All of those parts of us are called into action when that anger response is just going off. And also, if we stopped and built an awareness internally at that time, we'd also notice that our muscles are really tight, really tense. So next time you're angry, don't say, I'm not angry, because this is the catch-22. You know that who you are is not an angry person, but your response is coming out as anger. Okay? And what you can do is notice when your hands or your feet or your jaw, they're all clenched really tight. And in that way, you begin to build an awareness that your whole system has been triggered with the anger response. And it can be like the chicken and the egg situation where what came first? Was I triggered and then I became angry because I'm afraid and I don't know how to manage this situation, so I'm angry? Or did my heart want to protect my heart sensation come first, and then it triggered my whole system, and then my brain, my neurobiology's gone offline and responded to the trigger, and that's it. We can't even make sense of the whole process. And I know many years ago that is one of the things that I struggled with intensely and internally was, why am I angry about this? It doesn't make sense. And even at home with my kids, like my adult kids, they can say, Mum, why are you angry? And I'd go, well, I'm not angry. So internally for me, I'm not angry, but my immediate response appeared angrily. So what do? Anger is hooked into our thoughts and our beliefs. So they're the two areas that we're going to use in order to look at where and how I begin to change up the anger response. So recognising that it's an automatic response soft-wired into us, so not hardwired where it's permanent. So think of the hard drive on your computer where it's permanent and it stores everything. It's not like that. It's soft-wired where, you're on a program and you can just go press delete, right? Okay, so, rewiring the soft wiring takes a bit more than delete. It's a repeatedly hitting delete. No, I'm not going down that road, okay? So when we've got increased arousal, we do need to look at learning new skill sets. There's 3 areas that we look at learning new skill sets in. The first one is behaviour. Pardon me. So examine our behaviour. So we want to sit down and take the time, give ourselves time to examine what is the behaviour that's happening, and then look at different responses I can have in that situation. Okay, so imagine that you're on the train, or back to the train, you're on the train and everything's triggered you into an angry response today because of what happened yesterday and it felt out of control. So how can I begin to rewire my behaviour in that situation? What do I need to understand to increase my awareness so that I don't feel that I have to control it with my behaviour or with an angry response? Ask those two questions, and look, it is so personal, honestly. Sit down and ask the two questions and say, right, how can I manage this better? I don't have to have an angry response. I don't have to respond to the fear response that's going on, but I want to work out what I'm going to think and how I'm going to believe the next time this situation happens, because we all know it does happen again. Okay, so when we look at our thoughts and beliefs, we want to look at what were our thoughts leading up to the situation, and or another way to put it is, what were our thoughts leading up to the threat or the stress, to understand what our thoughts are and what we believe about the situation or person. So we want to say, even if I don't have control here, I won't be threatened in this situation. So that's a really long way of saying, I can know that I am safe in this situation. I'm an adult now and I can begin to work through this and feel safe and know that I can communicate to other adults around me what I need in this situation. I definitely have talked about this before, where I've said in the past, this back in my 20s, where I wouldn't say anything unless I knew I was right, because I was so terrified of being torn apart. But that doesn't help build relationships. Relationships get built through honesty. Another way of looking at this, or others do not have to be perfect in order for me to survive or be comfortable. So you want to look at the areas of where you feel discomfort. So there's no use saying I can be comfortable unless I'm acknowledging where I feel discomfort. So if you begin to flip it around and look at anger as the first sign of, where am I feeling uncomfortable? What can I do as I sit in the feeling of uncomfortable to build a better understanding of how, in this situation, we can go about this together? All right? Trauma is so interpersonal, and so is the anger. We work through it together. We work through it with safe people. There's a video on safe people. And when we work through these situations with safe people, we begin to feel safe, and our whole being begins to be able to know that we're safe to express what's happening for us, to express that we don't know how to manage it just yet, but we're working on it. We're a work in progress. All right. And that we can do this because we're adults now and we can go and learn how to manage it. Now you want to learn a whole different skill set in not only dealing with the anger, okay, because remember the chicken and the egg, it can be a straight out heart response to the threat, or it can be a trigger already wired into our neurobiology. We want to sit with somebody who can see the bigger picture for us and help us understand what's going on and how we can navigate it differently at any given point in time. And it's really, really important that we do this, because if we don't, it impacts our health. I watched my husband, the father of my children, die because he would not deal with his internal anger. And it was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life, is to sit back and let him work through it in his own way. And then he chose not to go and get professional help. And at the end of his life, he said to me, "You were right." And that gives me no happiness at all. But he needed to address the anger in order to be internally well. So I encourage you, take the bravest step you will ever take and seek a professional for help. It takes a lot of courage to do this work. It takes enormous bravery to take a step out and say, hey, I need somebody who can be my second bit of perception while my brain's offline, and I've never been taught how to manage this. And yes, I have people that I seek out in times as a mentor or as a coach or as a professional in order that they can help me see what it is that I can't see. And the reason why we want that is because we don't want to keep going down the same repeat road again and again and again. Have the most gorgeous day. Reach out and let me know if this helped you. Share it with people, the silent majority who still haven't had the courage to speak up and say, I'm having a problem. It's so important that we give them language. All of us, heck, I needed the language too. Without the language, we aren't able to begin to put a different framework around what's happening for us, and it is so, so, so important. Thanks for tuning in today. Blessings and dreams, and I will see you again tomorrow morning. Bye for now.